What are we discussing on today's Locked on Diamondbacks podcast? Hello, Josh Naylor. Goodbye, Christian Walker. And what's next for the Arizona Diamondbacks?
You are Locked on Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. You're listening to who? The always charismatic host of this podcast, Millard Thomas, multimedia journalist and I'm a graphic designer. So please go check out my website, millardthomas24.myportfolio.com. On there you can see all my latest work, from my packages to my articles to my photos and my graphic design. On today's episode, we are going to be discussing the Dbacks acquiring Josh Naylor, Christian Walker, signing with the Houston Astros, and what's next for Mike Hazen and the Dbacks front office this offseason. Thank you for making a Locked on Diamondbacks your first listen every day. I would not be able to do this podcast without you, my loyal listeners, sharing, subscribing, reviewing, doing all that so I could do this podcast for you. Thank you. It's free. It's available on all platforms, so please continue to tell your friends. And one of those platforms is YouTube. Please hit subscribe to Locked on Diamondbacks on YouTube. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Now let's get into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast. I do want to preface it and say I totally neglected to mention last week, we are in off-season mode, so that means we are back to just doing podcasts 3 days a week for the next few weeks, making it a little bit lighter of a workload for me because, guys, it's the off-season. There's not that much to talk about for the D-backs, but that's not true for today's episode because we actually have, for once, a lot of topics and information to get through. Usually the offseason can be a slugfest at times because we've seen the D-backs. It took them a while to make a move, but they finally made one where Christian Walker signing with the Houston Astros, which we'll discuss more in depth in segment number 2. D-backs had their contingency plan ready by going out there and trading for Josh Naylor from the Cleveland Guardians. They give up Slade Ciccone and like a competitive draft pick or whatever. Good move by this D-backs front office to go out there and get Josh Naylor. This was a player that we've discussed as a potential target if the D-backs missed out on Christian Walker. What should they do? Carlos Santana, Paul Goldschmidt, or maybe you just go out there and trade for a guy like Josh Naylor. And I've been saying recently on this podcast, it was more related to pitchers and saying, more teams should do what the Red Sox do. Trade players from your farm system for Chris Sale or Garrett Crochet instead of doing what the Yankees are doing, of giving Max Fried, 8-year long-term deals. But same can be said for position players because maybe it was a better deal for the D-backs to just give up Slade, who was a struggling pitcher for you in your system, clear that roster spot up, and bring in Josh Naylor, who is 27, coming off an all-star appearance. Like, I feel like doing that is probably better than going out there and signing Carlos Santana, who is coming off a very good year, but is also year 20, like age 40, like feels like Santana has been in the game forever. Paul Goldschmidt, I would have definitely welcomed a reunion of bringing Goldie back to Arizona, but he's also old. He's in the decline. D-backs just trade for Josh Naylor, where you can make the real argument that you look at his trajectory and it's going upwards. This is a guy that's still getting better. You look at his power numbers, 20 home runs in 2022, 17 in 2023, but this past year, 31 home runs, career high, 152 games as well, but 31 bombs, 108 ribbies, like a really strong power season. And considering Christian Walker was a guy who was between like 29 and 36 home runs every year, you could bring in a guy who's going to be right around that mark as well, and Josh Naylor, like from a power production standpoint, you might not have really any of a drop-off going from Christian Walker to Josh Naylor. You look at the plate discipline numbers for Josh Naylor, very similar, if not better, than a Christian Walker. Naylor is actually a very good guy and not striking out a ton. Christian Walker, this past year for Arizona, when looking at his K numbers, 24%. His career numbers, his career strikeout numbers around 23%. But you look at Josh Naylor, it was 16.6% this past year. That's also what his career K rate is. So strikes out at a rate significantly less than Christian Walker. His walk rate is also going up. It was 9.2% last year. Christian Walker was at 10%. So striking out less than Walker, walking around the same rate, maybe the same power production. Like from an offensive standpoint, the drop off from Christian Walker to Josh Naylor might not be that precipitous. I think Josh Naylor could give you 90% of the offense that Christian Walker gave us. You look at the high leverage moments for Josh Naylor this past season, really, really strong stuff. So you know he was good in the clutch, 324 average and over 1,000 OPS in high leverage moments last year. Runners in scoring position, over an 800 OPS, 2 outs in runners scoring position, over a 900 OPS. So this was a guy that was really, really good in those high pressurized clutch moments last year. And so from an offensive standpoint, you might not get a big drop off going from Christian Walker to Josh Naylor, which makes you feel really good. The biggest difference really is Christian Walker is a power righty. Josh Naylor is a power lefty. So from your lineup construction configuration, yeah, some things will change, but overall, final stat line from the offensive production, like it might straight up, Josh Allen might put up like 90% of the stats that Christian Walker has put up the last few years. The biggest difference between these two guys is probably when you look at that defense, because we know Christian Walker coming off 3 straight Gold Gloves, undeniably the best defensive first baseman in the sport. And for Josh Naylor, you wouldn't say that. Now, Josh Naylor, I don't think is a bad defender, but I don't think he's a great defender either. Going through the fan graphs, like different random metrics and advanced stats, like he's between like 8th and like 14th in a lot of those stats. And so he's considered like an average defensive first baseman. And so when you're looking at the Christian Walker replacement, offensively, it might not feel like that much of a drop off. You take the names off the back of the jerseys, you close your eyes, you just watch the ball, don't watch the at bat, because of course you would know watching a righty versus a lefty. Just watch the ball, just look at the final numbers, and you'd be like, oh, like if you did one of those blind resumes for Dbacks first baseman from 2024 versus Dbacks first baseman from 2025. If you just put the stats side by side, blind resume, I don't think they will look that much different offensively. Defensively is where the D-backs might feel a little bit. Christian Walker made so many game-changing plays down there at first base. Josh Naylor, again, average defensive first baseman. Some areas he's strong at, some areas not so much. And so that is probably what we'll feel the biggest squeeze with Christian Walker leaving. But for a contingency plan to get guy and Josh Naylor, 90% of the offensive production of Christian Walker, but still only 27 years old, coming off his first All-Star appearance. It's one of those moves where I'm like, what are the Guardians doing? Because I'm like, they trade away Andres Gimenez, they trade away Josh Naylor, but you acquire guys like Slade Ciccone and other struggling, players from these other teams. And it's like, why do you trade your good guys for struggling guys just because you want a little bit more extra control or whatever? Like, I think the Guardians make moves to just make moves at times. And it's like, I think sometimes you get too caught up in the how much control and years left does he have? Like, at the end of the day, am I getting the best player in the deal? And I think we just forget about that sometimes in baseball. Like someone told me on my YouTube comment section the other day that we shouldn't trade Ryan Nelson for Devin Williams because Ryan Nelson has way more control. But I'm like, what's more important to the D-backs? Do they need a 6th starter in Ryan Nelson, or do they need that go-to guy in the back end of their bullpen, Devin Williams? I think Williams would make much more impact on the D-backs than a Ryan Nelson. I think sometimes we forget who would actually be better for you as an organization, who's actually the better player. I think sometimes we get too caught up in the financials and the control and all that. And so I don't understand what the Guardians are doing here, but I am very grateful to see Josh Naylor coming into the building. But I am sad to see our guy, Christian Walker, leave for the Houston Astros. And we'll discuss his career in Arizona in segment number 2. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up the W. I love betting on which players will score a touchdown and how many points each team will score. It's thrilling. My favorite thing to do on the FanDuel Sportsbook app is the same game parlay. When I see that Arizona Cardinals are playing, sometimes I like to do a little Cardinals money line. Give me a little James Conner over on rushing touchdowns and give me Kyler Murray anytime touchdown. When that 3-leg hits, it brings a big smile to my face. So if you want a big smile on your face, just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more at FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And if you're looking to buy tickets to an upcoming sport or an event, then the best place to do that, of course, is going to be Game Times, because Game Time is the best place for last minute deals on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. They have this feature called all-in pricing. When you toggle this feature on, it shows you your total cost up front with no surprise fees at checkout. You could get a panoramic view from your seat before you buy. They also have the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right. Let's get back to the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. Now let's discuss Christian Walker and his departure from the Dbacks, and let's take a little look back at Christian Walker through his history with Arizona and discuss how Christian Walker, one of the best success stories that we've seen in Major League Baseball the last 10 years, and not a lot of people will talk about it. Not a lot of people will talk about how no one expected Christian Walker to be as good as he is. Christian Walker is a guy where, in reality, you could think about it where it's like, yes, he is 34, going to be 34 years of age, but in terms of like major league experience, like he's a young guy. In terms of full seasons where he's been a starter, like this is what his like 7th year entering as a full-time starter. Like he became a full-time starter at the age of 28 years old. And so even though his age on his birth certificate says he's going to be 34, I think he has a lot more left in the tank than people realize. When I saw him sign for 3 years, $60 million, I was like, how are the D-backs not able to match that kind of deal? Like that was his market value entering the year. That felt like the bare minimum. I was telling anyone who listened to this podcast, if you could get Christian Walker for $20 million a year, I was telling you if you could get him for 25, if you could get him for 3 years, $75 million or less, you have to do that deal if you're the D-backs. And I'm surprised we were not able to pony up 3 years for $60 million. Like we're paying Monty 20, we're paying Erod 20. It's like I would much rather have Christian Walker at his number than either of those two guys. Thankfully, we're able to get Josh Naylor as a contingency plan, but really upsetting to see Christian Walker go for that money because we're paying other guys on this roster the same annual salary to not be as good. So I am not happy from that standpoint, but good for Christian Walker. He is going to get some respect that he's been dying to deserve because he was never going to get in Arizona. Just not enough people watch the D-backs. Even when they were in the World Series, still not enough people. You go up and down the roster. Every player could say he's the most underrated player in baseball. Ketel Marte, Christian Walker. You could go Merrill Kelly. Like some of the best D-backs players are some of the most underrated players in the sport. I think Christian Walker is another one of those guys, and I think he'll finally get the respect he deserves playing for that team out in Houston. But really sad to see 3 years, $60 million is all it took. But I do want to go through his career with the D-backs and talk about how improbable of a success story Christian Walker was, because going through his history, I forgot. This was a guy that was drafted by the LA Dodgers back in 2009. Did not sign with that team, but we know how much Christian Walker crushes Dodgers pitching, how much he puts on a performance when he's in Dodger Stadium. And the fact that the Dodgers actually drafted him and he didn't sign, I'm sure Dodgers fans are upset about that. So he doesn't sign, gets drafted by the Orioles in 2012, backs up Chris Davis from 2014 to 2017. Chris Davis, one of the best power hitting guys of our generation. From 2014 to 2017, Christian Walker makes a total of 13 games on the major league level. Like, he's barely playing at all in Baltimore, just putting up some incredible power seasons in the minor leagues up there in Norfolk, Virginia, having some incredible seasons and everything like that. But you got Chris Davis hitting 50, 60 home runs for the Baltimore Orioles. Like, there's nothing that Christian Walker could do to earn himself an opportunity outside of Chris Davis getting hurt, and then you go on a crazy run. But that never happens. And so in 2017, after only playing 13 games over the last few years, Christian Walker gets waived by the Baltimore Orioles. And then what happens? He gets picked up by the Braves in February 2017. And then the Braves and Reds both waived Christian Walker in March 2017. So he's on like 3-4 different rosters by the time he gets to the D-backs in March 2017. And then even once he gets to the D-backs, it's still not like he had a path to playing. There still wasn't a great opportunity. He still has to go and back up Paul Goldschmidt the next 2 seasons. So this is a guy that breaks into Major League Baseball in 2014. And from 2014 through 2018, he is just not playing any games at all, does not even appear in an MLB game in 2016. Like, this is a guy who barely has any games played. This is a guy who's still like 5th year in the sport and still rookie of the year eligible. Like, that's how insane his career was when he started, because he was just never on the roster long enough, never played games long enough where he was just able to keep his rookie eligibility for years on end, despite you go on Baseball Reference, it's like, wait, it's year 4, year 5 for Christian Walker, and he still has rookie eligibility. Like, insane stuff. And so he's still backing up first base for another incredible guy in Paul Goldschmidt. And then it's like 2019 hits. And then so it's like, after 5 years of being a backup, not really giving an opportunity, now the D-backs are saying, hey, you're a new everyday first baseman. Go and fill in the shoes of our face of the franchise, Hall of Fame talent, who had like no holes in his game. He could hit for average, hit for power, incredible OPS. This was like a 30 stolen base first base as well in Paul Goldschmidt. This was a Gold Glover, like power, speed, average, contact, production, defense, like whatever you needed. Paul Goldschmidt could literally do it on the baseball field, on the diamond. And so for the D-backs to trade a player like that and then say, hey, Christian Walker, you've been in Major League Baseball for 5 years and have never played. You want to go play first base for us every single day? Yeah, that's exactly what Christian Walker did. And what did he do? He filled Paul Goldschmidt's shoes to the best of maybe anyone's ability in Major League Baseball. When you talk about filling in the shoes of a Hall of Fame face of the franchise type guy, Christian Walker did as good of a job you can do. Elite defense, kept the Gold Glove train rolling, the power, the production. We love Christian Walker, and the fact that he left for that money, really disappointing to see, but he's finally going to get the fame and notoriety he deserves out there in Houston. A great run for D-back first baseman. You basically a decade and a half of going from Goldie to Christian Walker. We get elite defense, elite power every single season. I don't know if that will ever happen again, but I am very optimistic. With Josh Naylor now in the building, I am very optimistic the D-backs can keep the train going of having really positive, really good first base play. And when you look at the D-backs franchise history ranks now, Christian Walker, definitely a top 10 guy, D-backs franchise history. You look at his WAR, tied with David Peralta for 6 all-time. You look at his offensive WAR, he's 10th all-time in D-backs franchise history. I'm surprised he's not higher in defensive WAR, to be honest. But this is a guy 8th in runs scored all-time. You look at doubles, he's also 8th. Like, pretty much any number. Home runs, he's 4th. Like, he's at the top of the leaderboard, top 10 in everything, 7th in RBIs. And part of it's also because not like the D-backs have a ton of great players who have played for them in their franchise history. But Christian Walker, despite not even, he spent 8 years with the D-backs, but only like 5-6 years as a full-time starter. Also, that 2020 weird COVID-shortened season mixed in. Like, it actually wasn't like a super long run for Christian Walker in Arizona, more like a 5-year incredible run, but something that we won't forget, a long enough run where he is one of the best D-backs players in franchise history. And he is someone that is going to be greatly missed, great locker room guy, great energy, great presence, and of course, had that big stick with him in the middle of the lineup. So many monster home runs from Christian Walker, so many incredible defensive plays at first base. We're definitely going to miss him, but happy to see him finally get the respect he deserves out there in Houston. But now I want to discuss what's next for the D-backs this offseason in segment number 3. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? That definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and it helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together all in one place, whether it's subscriptions or your spending habits or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon, rocketmoney.com/lockedon. All right. Let's get back to the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast and let's discuss what's next for the D-backs this offseason because so far, the D-backs finally made a move. They've done a bunch of minor league moves this offseason with guys like Christian Pache and some other guys I can't even think of off the top of my head right now. But in terms of moves on the major league level, transactions, we haven't seen a ton. Josh Naylor was pretty much the first big move of the offseason for the D-backs, and it came as a contingency plan. Once Christian Walker signed with the Houston Astros, it's like, what are the D-backs going to do? And then I think Paul Goldschmidt also signed before the Naylor trade. So it's like, man, we lost Christian Walker. We're not getting a reunion with Paul Goldschmidt. What are we going to do? The Josh Naylor acquisition, perfect. Again, I'm more in favor of trading a guy like Slade Ciccone, who has been bad, and bringing in a Josh Naylor instead of going out there and just signing 38-year-old Carlos Santana to a significant amount of money and then still having to watch Slade pitch for the D-backs and be bad. Like, I like the fact that we traded away someone who's struggling and brought back in someone who just made the All-Star team. So I think that's really, really good business by Mike Hazen and this D-backs front office. But Hazen also discussed, we're not done yet. Still a lot of work to do this offseason. That's a direct quote from Mike Hazen. So, yes, we did the Josh Naylor move, but what else is on the horizon? Because they have been linked to a lot of these potential available elite closers, right? They were allegedly really in on Devin Williams before he went to the Yankees. And again, I don't know how you were not able to get Devin Williams when looking at that Yankees offer, but that's okay. Now it seems like the D-backs are really interested in Ryan Hesley of the St. Louis Cardinals, someone that we've discussed a ton on this podcast because he is absolutely elite, a guy that could throw like around 100. The strikeout numbers insane for Hesley. Like, yeah, I would love him in Arizona, coming off a year where he just led the league in saves for the St. Louis Cardinals. And the Cardinals are a franchise where it feels like they need to retool, damn near rebuild a little bit. Goldie just left. It sounds like you're going to trade Arenado this offseason. Your rotation is old. Like, your best asset might be your closer in Ryan Hesley. And right now it feels like it doesn't sound like they want to trade him. Sounds like they're open to the idea, but they also want like potentially a gargantuan package back for Ryan Hesley. I think that's a little bit of the issue that the D-backs are running into right now. I don't know if they have the pieces that they would want to trade off if they are asking a lot for Hesley. But the D-backs are able to pull off a move like that this offseason. Like, again, Puck Martinez, and then throw out whether it was Devin Williams or Ryan Hesley, but someone in that mold, I've said repeatedly, that would be arguably the best three-headed back-end reliever corps in Major League Baseball. You just need one third guy to mix in with those two other really elite, high leverage, high velocity relievers. You give me a Ryan Hesley type to mix in with those two. I think that D-backs bullpen all of a sudden could be really nasty closing out games 7, 8, and 9th. Could be devastating, and you still got the Ginkles, the Mantaplies, and the Ryan Thompsons to mix in as well. I really like the idea and potential of the D-backs bullpen next year if they are able to acquire someone of the Ryan Hesley, stature. So that's probably the next big move for the D-backs. I think this offseason is to get a guy like Ryan Hesley or someone to be the back end of their bullpen. And then after that, it's probably getting another big at bat. Like, to be honest, a Paul Goldschmidt, Josh Naylor double duo at first base and DH could have been very interesting, because when you acquire Josh Naylor, of course, he's a lefty. We thought Pavin Smith, potentially could have been the D-backs first baseman, but he's a lefty too. So now let's look at it like this. You acquire Josh Naylor. Jock Peterson's probably not coming back. You could essentially use Pavin Smith now as your Jock Peterson lefty DH if the D-backs really want to go in that direction. If you really truly believe what Pavin Smith did last year in that small sample size has some legs, has some truth to it, because again, Pavin Smith, small sample size, but a COVID shortened season's worth of games. He played 60 games, 9 home runs, a 896 OPS, a 270 average. Again, I don't really trust it either, but if you think you get 100 games worth of similar production out of Pavin Smith as your lefty DH, that could be interesting. Maybe still go out there and sign Randall Grichuk. And so it's like Josh Naylor, everyday first baseman, and then Pavin Smith and Randall Grichuk as your two lefty righty DH options. That could be very interesting. And then Pavin Smith could still be the rest option for Josh Naylor if you want to go in that direction. Obviously, being the lefty probably doesn't make as much sense, but just something to consider. I think getting a high leverage, high velocity arm is the next big priority, but also the other big priority is still getting another big right-handed power bat in the lineup. So D-backs are definitely going to go in the direction of either of those two. I think it feels like a reliever might be a little bit more higher of a priority right now. I also think there are just more bats on the market they could come in and just fill in for your DH if you really want to. It's probably a little bit harder to find that elite closer, probably a little bit more of a competitive market. So I think the D-backs will probably put more resources and priority right now into getting a high leverage reliever for the back end of the bullpen. And then I think after that, go out there, get another bat for your lineup, more specifically, probably a righty power bat. And then, to be honest, yeah, there's still some things that the D-backs can work on and clean up on the margins. But for the most part, you do those two other things, get me another high leverage reliever, maybe two, and give me another power bat, maybe two. Again, just give me one of each. I would feel very good about this D-backs offseason, and then sprinkle in some other moves throughout to clean up the edges of this roster. Maybe you pull off a Jordan Montgomery trade. That still could be in the works, but for the most part, one other high leverage reliever and another DH power righty bat, and I would feel pretty good about this D-backs offseason. Now, that's it for this edition of the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. Come back tomorrow for more Diamondbacks news coverage and insight. And as always, stay safe, stay healthy, dose it.